Today we'll do more of like work, as in we'll start working on things because Rothko's process was quite tedious. Also, it had a lot of mixing, like preparation. There was a lot of preparation before he started his work. So ideally, we look at a little brief on his story as to how he got into this bit of abstraction. And his style of work. I'm not going to give you an insight into Rothko, who Rothko is, or as in his history, all of that, because all of that you can learn from the internet. But I'm going to give you a take around my understanding of Rothko's. And ideally, this is how, as an artist, you need to sort of look at another artist, right? It's not about learning their history and then replicating their style. It's about understanding their process and techniques and then trying to inculcate the same in your ways, right? What is more comfortable to you. So you, as an artist, as you progress in your career, you will find a way of expressing yourself. And it's not necessarily that you have to do exactly what the artist did. It's just finding ways and techniques that worked for them and then trying to merge it with your own at a very comfort. So there should be a middle ground when you're trying to create your own technique, understanding other people's work. And the screen share. So, are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Born in 1903, Mark Rothko. So one of the things you need to understand about Rothko was that he was very hermetic about his studio practice, as in he never allowed people to know about his technique. But he always, or rather often, asked people to visit his studio and see him paint. Um, the reason being that he wanted people to understand the experience, or sort of, I think Nadia has come. Yeah, so his practice was quite secretive, as in his techniques, the way he sort of layered his work, the mixing techniques, all of that was quite secretive in the way he sort of created his works. But people were allowed to come in his studio and see him paint. Ideally, also he worked on large canvases. So the shift that happened in his career was after 1950s, when he started experimenting with space and understanding about forms and trying to experiment with how forms could float in space. Now, if you look at a Mark Rothko work, like right now you're looking at one, it's titled Yellow and Orange. All his titles were very simplistic. It was about the experience rather than the work itself. He was a great fan of Mozart's music, and his understanding to art was that he wanted to evoke the same feeling visually what a person listening to music would get. That was his desire as an artist, and he worked on it quite extensively. So from 19 to So from 1950 onwards, he experimented with the style of his, and it just kept going, right? And he never changed after that. It was just him trying to find different sort of ways of expressing himself. His palette was quite vast in terms of the color palette that he used, from being bright reds, subtle yellows, pure colors, high key colors at times that he used, and a lot of deep colors that he used in his work. Mostly he worked with oils. And but it's not still, you can't still say that he completely and always used oils. It's an understanding, because nobody knew exactly what his process was. It's the conservatives who have found that he usually and also it was found that he had, while these conservatives who had restored his paintings over time figured out there was protein in his paint films, which also meant that he had mixed egg in paint. I know a lot of people would there must be a lot of confusion around how eggs are being mixed in oil paints, but so eggs have a quality of emulsifying paint, like as in if you thicken it with turpentine and oil, it becomes very cloggy. So to help it spread on the canvas much easier, a lot of painters earlier used egg to sort of create this layering that they could sort of make the paints translucent when they would apply it on the canvas. So there were different experiments that he sort of run through his career, and he continuously changed composition. He also almost every time painted translucent by adding a lot of washes. Now, all these terms may be a little confusing. We'll go into like the practical bit of it. There's a very interesting story about, I don't know how many of you visited the Tate. Has anybody visited the Tate?
No.
So in the Tate, there is a room dedicated to Rothko's work. The interesting story is that in 1958, he was commissioned to paint for the Seagram building in New York. And what happened was, after he finished the commission, suddenly he decided that he didn't want to give work to Seagram. And then they canceled the bond around it. And then he gifted these works to Tate. And till date, Tate has sort of kept these works in a certain light condition, the way he is described for so many years. So every time I would, like the time when I was in London, every week once I would go visit this place. And when you look at his works, you will understand that his works had a great quality in terms of, it just felt very divine the way it was painted. Like from far, when you look at images, it feels I could do that. But when you look at the work in person, it's a very different story altogether. Right. So I'll just take you through.
Why did you say that the work, if you look up close, is very different? Is it because the texture of the artwork or layering is very complex?
Yeah. So the thing about Rothko's layering was that he did a lot of washes. So what are these washes is, when you thin the paint with turpentine, it becomes translucent. It sort of stains the canvas. Like right now, okay, let me just take you through this. So when you look at his work, you're able to see that these forms are sort of floating in air, right?
Yeah.
And to create a texture like this, it takes time. So it sort of builds, you need to build over time to create something like this. It doesn't happen with one stroke of paint. So this quality was this sort of style and quality that he developed in his working and his process of painting took time, and it also gave him an insight into how he felt about things. Like so as artists, we need to also understand, I truly adore Rothko's work is because he was very consistent with his language. After a point of time, after a period, he just stuck to that, and he kept discovering it. But there may be, I would like to encourage you guys to talk about, do you think that sticking to a routine is boring?
I feel it's very important to find your style. And I also find routine is very good. And the reason for that is, although I'm from the architecture world, so I was working with an office called SCDA Architects in Singapore. So actually, if you look at the works, it looked the same 20 years back, and it looks the same today. And I think having a consistent way of doing things makes you focus on the large, bigger picture, and you don't get stuck in detail, in process, in a particular way of approaching artwork. And it helps you create something which is timeless.
Yeah. Also, I feel like the more, so if you have a routine, it also helps you figure out when you have a structure to yourself is when you're able to break that structure, right? You can't break a structure if you don't understand the structure itself.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of artists earlier had this thing, like even Jackson Pollock, if you go to see, after a certain period, just he stuck to the technique that he found was the most satisfying for him as an artist. Similarly, in case of Rothko's work, he just stuck to creating these rectangular works, which were sort of these boxes that he created. His whole idea was also to help people to look at his work and understand that these works were not just boxes of color, but it sort of had a deeper meaning to it. It was also to help them reflect in their own lives when you're looking at a work like this. A lot of his work is larger than size, as in they are huge works. The scale of these works are quite huge, and it sort of engulfs the viewer into it. Like he doesn't work on smaller size paintings. It's also because when you work on a much larger size and it's bigger than you, it feels overwhelming. So if you see here, right, you're able to see the washes of pink, you're able to see the washes of green, but it's still seeping through each layer one after the other. And he had this thing that he never used color the way it was. He always mixed paint, a single color paint with different other colors, approximately three to four colors, to create this quality the way he did in his works.
One thing, I actually went to this art shop yesterday, and I found um, um, while working on a canvas, I find the flexibility of the canvas a very big problem.
As in?
For the canvas, right? Because I'm an architect, I'm used to working on hard surfaces. Like even if you have a paper, you sketch, it's a hard surface, always a hard surface below, right?
Yeah.
So when you use a canvas as a frame, I find the flexibility very troubling because it moves. The surface on which you draw moves. So if he has such a huge canvas, won't the canvas always keep moving when he's painting?
Oh, so his huge canvases were first stretched onto a panel.
Oh, okay. So there is a hard surface below it.
Yeah. So he stretched it on a panel and then he hung it and then he started working on it. And also the brushes that he used. I'll also share a documentary, not documentary, it's sort of like a film around Rothko's time in the studio. There are a couple of resources that you can actually go through to understand Rothko's technique a little more. I'll also, one second.
But Manish, it also sounds like you might be pressing way too hard on your canvas, unless you're doing a huge canvas.
Or maybe my canvas is a bit cheap. I don't know. That's also possible.
You can also get canvas already stretched onto board. You can do wood panel. You can have raw canvas and just pin it to a wall. But it sounds like you might be pressing way too hard.
Okay. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, I'll just log in from my other laptop also. Yes, I'll just I'm just going to add this camera. Are you able to see anything? Yeah, so that is a work that I did during my master's. It was a study that I did on Rothko's work. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so now if you go to see the idea of Rothko's work was about layering, and he also did a lot of these washes, right? Yeah. This is about a 5 feet by 3 feet work. I'll have to. And this is my take on Rothko's works, right? So I was talking about the technique in which you figure out, you sort of blend your process and another artist's process just to understand how you feel about it. So I used the technique that he used in his work of creating a lot of these washes and using a lot of turpentine to thin down his paint. Also, then I work with a lot of these oil pastels. So I then inculcated the oil pastels within my work. So when you see the work in person, I don't know how much of justice this camera is doing, but when you see the work in person, it sort of gives you this same idea of structures floating within the painting without it being these rectangular forms. So these are not rectangular forms; these are more abstract in nature, right? And it still gives you the illusion of what Rothko's work did of floating, the structures floating. You able to see the work?
Yeah, we can see.
Right. Now what I'll do is I'll take you guys out to the actual process space. One second. For this bit, I would encourage that all of you have. Do you guys have your canvases and materials in hand?
Yeah, ready.
Everybody else?
I have a small size canvas. I'll be using that.
Yeah, that's okay. Lori, nahi, Najiha.
I don't, but I'm just gonna watch.
Okay, sure. That's all right.
I might have to. I'm feeling super distracted by my work deadline, so we'll see how long I can last.
Oh, okay, no problem. Sharing? No.
I don't know if you know this, but we're getting the EOS webcam utility screen.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to switch on the camera. One second. Sorry for the delay, one second.
Andrew, I've got my acrylics out. I have not got my oil paints out. Is it okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Thanks.
A little harder to work with. You can replicate the same technique on with the acrylics, and then you can move it to the oil.
Yeah, I'll do that later because I didn't know where I've kept my oil paints.
That's all. You're able to see the screen?
Yes.
I cannot see anything. Wait.
Not very clear. We're seeing more of the plants. Yeah.
Just a second. Yeah, hi. Sorry. Are you all able to see?
Yeah.
Sorry about the delay. I'm trying to figure out camera setup. So I
Is
have
that how you mix your colors?
yeah. Right now
That's
for demonstration purposes, like this is a broken glass piece or other. I have like these glass pieces in my studio space. So I use these because it helps in looking at the color much better.
Mhm.
You can get these. I think you all these. You get these pieces. These are like about 6 mm, not 6 mm, 4 mm glass pieces.
Yeah.
Would acrylic sheets work as well?
Yeah. You can also work with acrylic sheets.
Flexi sheets, which you get here.
Yeah. So what I do is when I'm looking at a technique, right? I usually use cheaper oil paints because then it's easier to like even if you waste it, it doesn't hurt so much. um, so you could do that because I saw Manish asking a lot of questions around what paints to use. So ideally, just look at getting a set of cheaper acrylics and cheaper oils when you're
What
experimenting.
what brand do you use for this? Or what
Right now, I'm
brand?
using Camlin.
Okay.
Camlins are quite reasonable. Like for a 120 ml tube, it costs you about the MRP is 385, but you would get it for like 300 bucks, 350 bucks, depending on where you're buying it from and if you're a regular at the store. Um, so you can get these oil paints. Now I'll just start with the technique bit. Also, you get turpentine. So you have turpentine. These are turpentine and oil. Um, so what Rothko essentially did in his technique was have let's look at a crimson. Also, you will see the opacity level in your tubes. You can see it. Here you can see it. For other colors, you may have it at the back of your tube. Depending on that, you dilute your oil colors.
Oh, interesting. What does it look like? Let me just see.
Okay, so for example, are you able to see?
Oh, can't see too clearly.
Okay.
Sorry, I cannot see the transparency of the oil paint. Where does it say that?
No, not the so it'll tell you the opacity of the oil paints. It'll can you show the tube? What tube are you?
Or maybe I'll send a picture of this.
Yeah, you're able to see the panel, right?
Yeah, we can see everything.
Okay. So ideally, he took 4 colors. This is the canvas. Okay. I hate working in such small spaces, but right now no option. Okay, so first I'll do the mixing bit. So ideally, so for example, we're taking a crimson here, right? And then you wash it. Now, what's a wash is you add turpentine to it. I'm using here round brushes because it's a smaller canvas, but ideally he used, so this is a wash, right? You're diluting the oil paint to a very, very thin layer to such a level that you can just stain the canvas.
Can I know why turpentine and why not linseed? I thought linseed oil is what is used for mixing with the paints, and turpentine is used for washing it.
Yeah, so we're creating a wash here. Achha, so yes, you meant that you thought turpentine is just to wash brushes.
Yeah, I really don't know. I'm just asking.
Okay.
So
Ideally, turpentine is also you can use it with paint. It's to thin down your paint.
So what is linseed oil for then?
Linseed oil is basically, so linseed oil creates this texture when you mix it with oil, is that it makes it a little more thicker, but it makes it usable. One of the ingredient in your oil paint is linseed oil.
Yes.
It has oil in it.
Yeah.
So to thin down the paint, you use oil further down to use it for application purposes. Now with turpentine, you create a wash with.
Okay.
So with turpentine, you create a wash with it, right?
Yeah.
So you thin it to such an extent. You thin it to such an extent wherein you can stain a canvas. So ideally, Rothko's technique was this of staining the canvas. Right now, okay, so we create a wash, right? You can see it. Genie. And you just apply this wash.
So this is a bit like watercolors basically. We thin, the first wash is always a very, very thin wash.
Yeah.
So is there a reason you're using a thin brush for this wash right now?
No. So just because of the space, I'm using this brush. Ideally, for a larger canvas, Rothko's thing was to use brushes like these.
So can I use this one
Yeah,
right now for the
yeah.
wash?
Yeah. Also, I would suggest that you keep your canvas on the floor rather than vertically, because it'll drip.
Yo, I've already put it on the wall. Is it okay?
Matlab, if it doesn't bother you and if your space doesn't get dirty, it's fine.
Oh, you're saying it will drip and all.
Yeah, because you're creating a wash, right? Like you're seeing right now.
Oh, okay, so I'm using this glass mixing thing, which is very similar to yours. But I think the painting will stay vertical because I've stuck it now. Okay. That's what I was asking earlier.
I think I'll watch for now.
So you keep thinning the paint and creating these washes.
Manish, would you mind turning off your camera? Because I find it distracting to watch the other two, the Andrew's two cameras. Thanks.
If you have any questions, please keep asking about paints, about mixing, about anything else. It's going to be very boring else.
So Andrew, I would have guessed that you would have painted only part of the canvas and then maybe picked a different color or a darker or a lighter wash, but you're using the same wash over the whole canvas for now?
Yeah, so ideally he started off, so Rothko's technique was about the reason that he had such sink in his work was also because his underpainting. So he did a lot of underpainting. So approximately ranging from about 10 to 15 underpaintings. So an underpainting again is these washes that you create. In acrylics also you create washes. In oil you create washes. So it's sort of like this build-up that you do, right?
Got it.
So the sink at the top will only happen when the bottom foundation has a structure to it. So though abstraction looks as if it's very unstructured, but the development of it is quite structured when you go around, like when you start it. So
you know, I get the idea of underpainting. I have seen underpainting that isn't all the same color too, you know, underpainting in sections. So are you saying that it's only later in Rothko's process that
he
departs, does sections in a way?
Yeah. So right now I did a single color underpainting, right? Now, are you able to see?
Which color did you use, Andrew?
I was using crimson right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now you're able to see the box. We are going to create another. And he had this thing, right? He never used colors in the same form. He always sort of added more colors to it to create these washes. Uh, and now I'm going to use a little oil.
Can you please tell us what colors you mix now?
Yeah, so I used cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, cadmium red, and now I put turpentine to thin the paint down. This is just um, an understanding of Rothko's techniques. As in, nobody till date knows exactly how Rothko painted, but it's basically a study that people have done on his paintings, the residue, the mixes, the washes that they have seen on the layers and layers of work that he has done, and then sort of understood as to how and what he would have used. Uh, it's not necessarily that maybe this is what he used, but this is just a style replication that we're doing right now. Also, the actual sort of mixing that Rothko essentially did was he mixed. That's the that's so ideally the exact version of his mixing takes about 6 months. Is what I used in my work, which I showed. It's titled Tracing a Memory. I'll share a PNG of that work if you want to see more closely, a high res version of it. Um, the reason that so in his technique, the if you want to exactly replicate Rothko's color mixing technique, he used oil paints and turpentine to a large extent, and even oils, and he would store these jars. So ideally he would, for example, he would take a glass jar, um, take about um, say 5 to 10 ml of a certain color. So, for example, you take a crimson red, right? And then you take 5 to 10 ml of it, and then you mix it with a little bit of oil. That would be about 5 ml of oil, and then you fill it up with turpentine. Um, and then you mix it nicely, like you actually shake it and mix it nicely. Um, After that, you store it in a place and don't touch it for at least a month or 2 months. Why? Because then the heavier sediments in the pigments come to the bottom. The lighter pigments, the lighter sort of residue of the pigments would stay on top. And then he would create these washes. So he would take the top part of the turpentine, which is mixed with color, and he would start creating the washes. So there was a different quality that you get. That's how you keep experimenting with his techniques. So these are the techniques that people have developed over time after studying his work. It's not something that was exactly written. Nobody found copies or written works about Rothko's work from his studio space. That's the reason people just found ways to replicate what they saw in his paintings during his restoration process. So also he had this thing that he wouldn't wash his brushes, as in like while he's layering, right? Like I finished creating this bit, I wouldn't wash the brushes completely. I would just rub it so that there's still residue of the previous layer in this. Right now I'm using Indian red. And cadmium red deep.
So in this one, you're adding linseed oil or
I use
same
a
as
little bit of linseed oil and I use turpentine.
both? Okay. So why did you add linseed oil also right now?
So linseed oil is also to blend two colors. So when you are creating a wash, you can use just turpentine. But when you're mixing a couple of colors together, for those colors to blend together, you use linseed oil in the beginning, and then you uh, create that into a much thinner layer by putting turpentine in it. Also, you'll have to be very careful about the amount of turpentine that you use, because then it should not, like your work should not start cracking.
Start what?
Cracking.
Crack. What does that mean?
So basically, when you use a lot of turpentine, right, the ratio has to be quite. It's not a definite math around it, but it can't be overdone also. Else your canvas starts cracking with time. Like
Oh,
colors, it'll start cracking.
I see. I see. Cracking. Okay.
This is a fan brush that I'm using right now. I'm thinning down the paint a little more with turpentine. So he also had this thing wherein the reason that he used a lot of turpentine was also to flare up these layers. Now
What to the layers? What do you say?
to flare up the layers, as in when you use oil in your paints, right, and then you're applying it, these the layers that you create would be very submerged and solidified. The moment you use turpentine, they are broken and they are much thinner in their sort of texture that they form on the canvas itself.
Yes. In your artworks, what is your preference for the strokes? Do you prefer horizontal strokes or vertical strokes?
It depends on what is your idea around what you're trying to create. Um, this is just I'm just replicating his style. Um, you can't like like, if you see his what he did was actually was a much larger canvas and there was no exact method of him applying paint. Like it wasn't left to right or top to bottom. It was more haphazard. But as he developed it much further after it dried, like layers kept drying, and then what he created was a little more structured. As in, like the layers became much thicker.
Mhm. So you don't have any personal preference of yours. It's only based on what you're trying to create, right?
Yeah. I'm using ultramarine blue right now, mixed with Indian red. Oil. And like one of the things about Rothko is a fun fact about Rothko, or rather a sad fact about Rothko was that he was a very depressed man. Like he had a lot of things going on in his head. So post 1953, his work started becoming less brighter and it became much deeper in the color palette that he started using because his sole idea about what he created was to express himself, his ideas, right? His personal feelings. And he wanted the viewers to understand what it felt like while he painted. And he sort of resorted to, am I audible to people?
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, he sort of resorted to pure form of color expression was just because of this. He wanted people to understand what he went through personally as an artist. He had a very strict, what do you say, a routine that he followed. He painted all night. Morning went for a coffee and smoke to the nearby cafe from his studio. And then he was quite methodical in his the way he sort of conducted himself. Why do you think it's so important to put the finger on?
Shruti?
using ultramarine blue now.
So you're using the direct paint over here. You're not adding any turpentine or.
No, I put turpentine. Using oil. Now, ideally, you'd let it dry, but with the whole demonstration thing, as you keep building up layers, then you start increasing the ratio of oil versus paint.
Ideally, how many layers do you do generally?
In my work,
Yeah.
so in my work, personally, I go about to 25, 30 layers, depending on how long the work is taking. But it's also about, like, abstraction is also about a lot of patience. Like I like when I was much younger, I was impatient about the way I put paint on canvas, and I would not let it dry. You learn by mistakes, right? Like, so you keep making these silly mistakes around um, using paint and understanding what goes well and what doesn't. Paintings crack. Um, a lot of the paint gets wasted, but with time and finding your own technique which works for you, you figure out.
Which brand of paints do you use for your work, professional work?
So I usually use, for my acrylic works, I use golden acrylics, and for oil paints I use Winsor and Newton. But it's only when, like, I'm working on a piece. But a lot of my drawings at home, or a lot of my testings that I do with palette, is with Camlin or Pablo.
I found Fabio a bit more translucent than Camlin. Is it true, or is it my thinking?
They are a good quality of paint, but I feel like Camlin does a better job. But I think it depends on how your mixing has been. Like, what's your mixing technique?
No, this is, I'm talking about acrylics, sorry, not oil paints. I had Fabio and Camlin. So Fabio, I found them quite translucent, so I moved to Camlin.
Okay, I think Camlin also has a artist.
I use artist grade.
Okay. Now the thing is, Rothko's technique, he used much larger canvases, right? So the spaces that he created which was sort of like this unset border that got created while he painted, was then washed. Right now, it shouldn't be, but ideally, what he did was, after, say, about 7 to 10 days, or about 15 to 20 days, as it keeps drying, the canvas kept drying, then he would wash the edges. So that is what is called flaring up the edges. So in his technique, how do I show this bit? Let me share my screen. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
So you see this bit.
Yeah.
This is called flaring, which he did using turpentine. So he burnt the canvas, as in like not literally burnt, but like when you use an excess of turpentine, it sort of burns through the paint layers to create that. I'm using cobalt blue. And then we'll tie up the whole work. Oil. Ideally, he didn't make these boxes as such. He just kept going and painting like this. And the the idea of these box, the reason that it has to be done this way is because there's no other, it's too small a space to be going crazy on the canvas. I am washing it right now, not because it's the technique, but it's just that right now to create that whole illusion of layers, immediately this is the only way. Are you guys able to see?
Watching you.
Please ask any questions if you have. Anybody available?
Quite meditative watching you paint.
Andrew, what's your favorite color?
What's my favorite color? Black is my favorite color.
Black?
Yeah. This is a more later stage of Rothko's work, which was a little more dark and depressing. I think that's my mood right now. So this is what I use. That's why I use such a dark palette. All right. That is the right. So ideally, after this, it has to dry quite some time before you create the the washes part, wherein it should look like um, yeah. So for it to sort of reach the stage of differentiation, it needs to dry for a little bit more.
When you say dry, are you saying it needs to dry for a day when you go for the second layer, or two, or what is it actually?
So because it has quite a lot of turpentine, it dries much faster comparatively. Um, so give it at least 3 days, uh, 2 to 3 days before you do the wash bit, wherein it creates this illusion of floating, right? Right. So right now, it just feels very simple in terms of just it took half an hour to sort of create this bit, right? When it's on a much larger canvas and you're applying paint, the whole texture, the whole process, even the way you mix paints would completely change, and the tonality of the work itself will also change because there's a much larger surface that you're working on, and the brush strokes are not going to be as close as this is. Um, so that's the difference, right? So for example, you cannot replicate a work which on has always been seen in a much larger context because it's actually literally produced on a much larger canvas. So that technique can be sort of replicated completely on a much smaller canvas, as small as this. This is about 18 by 20 inches. For you to create that depth, to create that even the illusion of forms floating, or even the form being as vivid as his work, it needs to have space, um, and you need to have a lot of space when you're creating works like Pollock's, Rothko's, literally in the painting and for yourself also. Any questions?
My question is that how many layers would you do at one point of time and then wait for it to dry?
So ideally, it's great to do one layer at a time. And
Okay.
so personally, for me, when I'm creating a work, I would do like I'll share some of my work. I think Kamala, you were not in there for the first session. No?
But I watched the recording.
Okay. So shut this off. So in my personal practice, I usually go for about 25 to 35 layers, depending on what the scale of work is and what am I trying to work on, or what is my thought process for a certain work. Also, preferably, it's when you're working with oils, it's good to create a certain time frame when you're creating these layers, because then it's easier to even work on those layers later on, right? Because for example, so the basic understanding on oil painting is that you can rework on it. That everybody knows.
No idea.
Okay, so ideally you can rework on your oil painting, because even say after couple of years you can retouch it with oil paints again and then rework on it. What happens with mixed media is that it starts to break the canvas, paint, the layers. There's a lot. So either it has to be a pure medium. A pure medium is when there's no mixture done, as in if it's just oil, it's just an oil painting completely. If it's acrylic, it's just acrylic completely. A mixed media is when you use oil and acrylics and other mediums like pastels, charcoal, pencils, so that's where mixed media, even collages, you can even use cut bits of paper, cloth, material, a lot of things you can use to create a mixed media work. So that is mixed media. So when you're working with pures, you can always rework on it. So if it's a pure oil, you can always rework on it. If it's a pure acrylic, you can always rework on it. One of the hardest mediums to work with is watercolor, because it needs a lot of patience and it needs quick hands for you to manipulate sort of the whole movement in the work. Let me just share. Any other questions anybody has? Najia, anything you want to ask? Laurie?
No, no questions. I was just looking at how you carried out the technique.
I was thinking about washes in general and how you can use washes in acrylic to play up or play down a color, and you can use color theory. Would you ever do that? Intentionally choose a very different color?
So in acrylics, you can do the same thing with water as a medium to do the wash bit, and then you can layer it with medium itself. Medium as in the acrylic medium, because then like what you do in, or what we right now saw in Rothko's technique, in which we washed it with turpentine, did a wash with turpentine, and then created these thin translucent layers. You could do the same with acrylics and water and create these translucent layers.
Yeah,
And
question wasn't about the medium and how to do a wash. It was about the use of color theory and complementary colors. And you use similar colors in your Rothko piece. But would you ever layer contrasting colors to get that glow from underneath?
So I personally have experimented with these really contrasting colors in my work to create something. Like, for example, this is a very old work of mine. Right, so this is acrylics. I have used an underpainting of.
We cannot see. We'll just hold on for a second.
Sorry, are you able to see?
We can see now. Yeah, you're saying?
Yeah, so this is wherein I used a very contrasting color to the darker shades on the topper layer. The underpainting is a very bright color. And though it's not actually, what do you say? I have actually painted the yellow on top after I've created the whole work. But it feels as if it's peeping out of the layers, right? It's sort of like this whole, like it's peeling out and coming in. So these are the illusions that you can create with the different techniques, also using the understanding of colors. For example, I'll just share. Like in this technique, also over time, while you keep experimenting with different techniques and methods, you will create your own style. Like this work is with a collector in London. So if you closely look at this work, you see these textures, right?
Sorry, I cannot see. Are you showing? We can only see your desktop. Can you guys see it? Hold on.
Sorry, 1 second. Now are you able to see?
Yeah, can see.
Yeah, so this work, so if you go to see this work, you see the same sort of washes that was done in Rothko's work, wherein there was underpainting and oil washes. This is not done in that way. So what I did was I used a tree branch, a bark of a tree, kept it under the canvas, and then I rubbed it with this. So over here we have these metal scrubbers to wash our vessels, right? So I used that. So I first did a underpainting. I did a wash with oil color, which was of a deep purple, and then I put that over a bark of tree, and then I rubbed it with a metal metal piece, which was basically like these how to explain it. It's sort of like a scrubber. So I use that to scrub the canvas, thin the fibers in the canvas itself, and then I sort of imprinted the bark's texture on the canvas, and then I started working on the canvas. It was like that's how I prepare my canvas. Like preparation, like prepping your canvas also takes. You need to figure out what is the thought process, what are you looking at, how do you want to achieve that texture. Even these smaller dots that you see, these are all textures from the bark itself, because I replicated the complete nature's imprint on the canvas itself. So these are some of the techniques that you could do personally also, like with experimenting different methods. You can use, so for example, in Rothko's technique, he used egg yolk to make the oil paint emulsive, the way he used it on the canvas also, right? So you can use anything to do that, like just to see what works and what doesn't work for you. In this work, I have this work was basically an experimenting that I did, wherein I did a lot of writing on the canvas. After I painted it, I used charcoal stick to write on top of it, and then I repainted it. And these writings are basically from my diary. I have a diary of mine which I sort of write my thoughts in, and so I used those thoughts onto the canvas itself, and then I painted them with a darker oil paint. And the black paint is actually what is it called? It's an industrial paint, enamel paint, which we used, yeah, in Jackson's method in our previous session.
So is it more like a matte finish or a glossy black?
No, it's a matte black. This is the work that I showed you right now. This is a high resolution photograph of it.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Lovely. So soft and so lovely.
Feels amazing.
Right, like as in, I used his technique of mixing paints, but I did not replicate it into the boxes as Rothko's, because I want to have my own play in it when I'm creating my own, because it's my work, right? And it's my understanding of Rothko's technique. So as you sort of create your own work with this whole Rothko's technique, try to figure out your space within Rothko's work, rather than having a Rothko being painted at home. It's great to replicate, but then it's also nicer to have your language within an artist's work. That's when you will start to develop your own style, right? Because you'll always have people replicating a master, but to create something really unique, understanding a master's work is more essential as an artist, as you keep sort of moving into your career space as an artist. So in this technique, I used the washes bit. I washed my canvas with turpentine and the pigments that I used. And then I built it up over time. This work has 22 layers and 4 layers after the pastels have been introduced in the layer. So ideally 24 layers before I sort of close the work itself. This work, like I said, mixed media can be used in your works to express sort of what your idea is. This was a work that has, this is also a collector, the collector has in London. This was a work which has fabric in my canvas, and I have a personal method. I use a lot of fire in my work. Fire as in like literally fire. So I use a blowtorch to burn the canvas. And at what point I do that, I use the technique, I cannot give you a definite answer, because it's how I feel about when I need to use it. So over time, you sort of you figure out your own quirky techniques, which are very, very, it may sound very absurd to the people, but it's your style, right? And there's a very interesting quote by Michael Phelps, or rather it was the Nike's quote or Nike's advertisement tagline. It said, "What you do in the dark brings you in the light." So it doesn't matter as to how you come up with the technique or what the technique is. People don't need to know. But when they see the work itself, and if it's moving them or it's creating them to think about something, then you have achieved what you had to achieve. Is anybody talking?
I just typed, I love this.
Please ask any questions, or not just questions, like if you want to share about your techniques or your take on.
Do you mind sharing how you use that blowtorch? I do have a blowtorch, but we only use it for creme brulee or something.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, the as much understanding I have of oils is that if I've used a blowtorch, my canvas will burn.
No.
Because I just want to understand how does it work. You have a video to share? How does it look like? That'll be very interesting.
You use a lot of it in fluid art also to get silicone, to get the cells, the blowtorch.
I have a I ideally thought that at tomorrow's, like the next Sunday's classes, when I thought I would share some of my techniques or just show you some of my work and just talk about my work. But
We'll wait, yeah. Or if you want to show us now, whatever. Very interesting.
I don't know if I have the. I think
So I'm going to go. Time to get back to my work deadline. Thank you.
Sure, Laurie. Thank
See you, Laurie.
I'll show you if it's okay, I'll show you a video of my technique. Are you able to see the screen? Are you able to see the screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Can you hear the sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so you use the bark. I didn't notice that. That's really genius, you know.
So there's a lot of it's about how you sort of reach a point which makes you feel comfortable about how you look at your work. I think it's only with like time, you keep practicing and you keep sort of experimenting, you lose some of your canvases while you create these works. You waste a lot of paint when you create these works. The whole experimentation bit is very important, because then that's where you'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. What are the techniques that makes sense to you? What are the artists that sort of you're able to relate to? And it may also take you into a very different dimension altogether. Like for me, for the longest time, painting was my source of creativity. I felt after my whole art school bit, which I pushed myself to get into, because I had a corporate job and I felt like I was very comfortable. But being comfortable as an artist necessarily doesn't give you growth. You have to reach a point wherein you're feeling uncomfortable about your process, because that's where there is a chance of growth. The moment you get comfortable as to, oh, I'm able to make these works, showcase it here, sell it, making a little bit of money about through art. It's not about, and then you'll have to figure out what kind of an artist are you, right? What is the path that you want to choose as an artist? um, you can either be somebody who's creating these smaller decorative works which are easily sellable and buyable by people at a much reasonable cost, um, doesn't need a lot of your emotional bit of it being mixed into it. Or you can be somebody who, you can choose the other way wherein you're talking about how you feel about things, your perspective about the world, your perspective about understanding as an artist, as a human, how you relate to things. For me, like right now, my study for the last, say, a decade now has been about how we as humans respond to things around us, whether living or non-living. That's been my study, and that's what I've been working on. And artists that relate to these sort of concepts is what I look at, and then use their sort of techniques, understand their methods, and then I have my own understanding of things, and um, my own take on things. Like for example, a very bizarre conversation that I had with an art student from School of Visual Arts in New York, Sava, was so I had uploaded a work of mine on Facebook. This was 2015. Uh, and a friend, my cousin's friend who's in the US, she saw the work, and she was doing her undergrad in Sava that time. She saw the work and then she asked me how did I come up with this texture on my painting, because it, for them, they were being taught in their undergrad textures and all of that bit. And then I told her that I used a hot towel. So basically I put a towel in really hot water, squeezed it, and then I put it on my canvas, on my acrylic board on which I was creating this work. As in, I put it and then I took it off. So what heat does to acrylic is also, it sort of dries up immediately certain parts of it because it's high temperature, right? And then at the same time, the liquid bit of it, which is water, is creating this translucent textures within the work. I don't know if I have the photograph. I should have a photograph of this work to get it.
Did I miss the blowtorch part, because I couldn't see in the video that
No,
you
I
had
don't have the video here. I think it's my drive. I'll show it maybe next class. That's okay.
All right, yeah.
Let me see if there's a photograph of this work, what I'm talking about.
With the towel, very interesting. Yeah.
I can't find. Yeah, I think I found it. Yeah, I'll just share. Are you able to see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the work. You see this texture that has been created.
Yeah, beautiful.
So ideally, you just keep looking at different ways of, like this work of mine called Iman. I'll just show you. This is just a photograph of me burning the canvas. But I should show you a video of it. Also, I've used wood to create my work. So you can use different surfaces. That's a topic altogether. Like that's a whole conversation that we can have about surfaces, because surfaces are very important. This, you can use different techniques. Um, this is a technique in which you basically just, you have a lot of pigment on one side of the canvas and you close it, and then when you open it, you have the same side but just different, what do you say, a different take on things. It's also a psychological test that is, it's developed by this psychologist. What's his name? The
It's almost like a mirror, right? But
Do it when you were kids.
not really.
Yeah, when we used to do it as kids,
In
like
school, yeah. We used to put ink and do it.
yeah. So, and then I've used resin in my work. This is, I've used to create my works, I've used resin. This is a work of mine for an exhibition. This is another work of mine. So I don't use resin, as in I don't, my way of using resin was that I never use resin to, so basically a lot of artists, what they do is they create a work and then they pour resin on top of it to create the illusion of resin. But I mixed resin within the pigment itself, like pigments and resin were mixed together and then layered, just like my oil paintings or my acrylic paintings. I would layer it with different um, sort of like translucent layers of resin, and then gets deeper in pigments and then much deeper in pigments. The best part is when it dries and comes together. You can't figure out what it's going to exactly look like. So I did a series of these works. Then I did panel, wooden panel, and I use mixed media on that. So it's purely on how you look at work. Then you collaborate with different artists. So this was a work for mental health week in London. This got featured in one of our exhibitions that happened. I collaborated with a photographer. What you see around the photograph was done by me. So that's how you sort of grow, just creatively. You figure out different ways of looking at things. This is a photograph series that I did. Just the whole burning thing.
So what is a safe place to burn? And how do you burn this? Oh, maybe, oh, you already said you'll share later.
Yeah. I'll show you how we can do that. But then you're looking at different ways of looking at things, right? Different mediums can. I also did a series using my. So this is a painter's rag. So a lot of painters usually have a rag wherein they wipe their brushes. It's also good to have a rag because then, because washing your brushes continuously on in turpentine is not a good thing, because then it also hurts the bristles. So ideally what you do is you do like one dip in turpentine and then you keep rubbing it on the the rag to take the paint off, and then you put it in oil to loosen up the what do you say, the bristles, and then you rewash it in turpentine once again, and then you clean it up. The last bit is of rubbing it on the painter's rag. So I had the painter's rag, and during the COVID time, I wanted to look at how I could use something which is non-living, and then I'm photographing it into as in like it's sort of like my model, right? I'm looking at it as my I'm the stylist uh, of that model, and so I photograph the cloth in a certain ways, as in I stuck these on wall, taped them, and then I photographed them in different sort of angles just to look at the piece and what I feel about it when I'm looking at it. So it also helps you open up in different directions your mind to just get more creative about things. Smaller drawings, right? And then you can go around, you can do a series of things. You can also, this is a work of mine, as in this is a photographic work, which is also like a part of collectors. It's part of a collection for a collector. This is not a painting, this is a photograph, but what you see underneath my foot is a painting of mine. And then
This is really nice. Yeah.
so this work is called a self portrait with my painting. This was also during the COVID. I was just quite upset about how it was feeling, like personally how I was feeling about things. So I created this work. It's called the mirrored reality, and this is just a little bit of writing around the work. So yeah. Anybody wants to share anything? You can share your work or talk about your work and anything else.
So yeah, I actually finished something. Maybe I'll just take a photograph and share. Give me a second.
This is Jeannie, my sister's dog.
Are you able to see on WhatsApp? Oh, sorry. You're showing your dog, is it?
No, this is my sister's dog. So I just came to my sister's place actually to take this session.
Okay. So I tried.
So if you see this bit right here,
Yeah.
that is your opacity level of your oil color. As in, this is semi opaque.
Okay.
Like if you see a tube that is either completely white or completely black, will mean the opacity level is much higher.
See. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Got it. Okay. Interesting. And what is this? The star means what actually?
Sorry?
There is that rectangle, there's a square and there's a star. So what is star about? You were telling me something about the star. So opacity, I understood the square needs to be filled for it to be opaque, is it?
Yeah. Like
And
if completely filled, that means it's an opaque, like when you apply it on the canvas, it's going to be completely what the color is. It's not going to show you the layer of the canvas.
And the stars are
The level of it.
level of it. What does that mean? Sorry.
Like as in, if it's completely opaque and it's 2-star, I think so. I don't know how. I've never used. Is this?
Okay, I'll run too. We have another class coming up soon.
Yeah, I think
Thank you
it's.
so much. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Kamla, for being a part of this.
Sorry, you were saying?
So I think it's the level of. I have not. Usually, it's completely opaque, or if it's semi-opaque, then it'll be half. It'll be just a triangle bit of it. I don't know what the star means though. I've never. Which one is it?
I'll figure out.
Dollar and Romy. Yeah. So basically, the star rating system is to understand the performance of the paint. Extremely permanent, moderately durable, and I think I'll just share this with you. I've sent you a link.
All right, Ken.
Okay. Thanks, Manish.
Thank you so much.
You have a class, another class?
We are actually attending another class by Prasad, which is for wildlife, which is more of pen and ink and a very black and white. So this is a bit different. I'm really enjoying the class. I think for the first time, I got myself exposed to abstract and the layering, and I do understand where it's actually quite hard. It's not as simple as it looks, because even though I'm an architect, we do understand visuals, but I think oils and paints have a very different life of their own. Although I may be able to think of composition, spaces, people, line work, shades, but I think art world is a different world altogether.
You should
Yeah.
also, I think, put in your architectural sort of understanding and principles in your work.
Oh,
That'll be your point.
my actually work has been like group housing, master plans in Singapore, in India, Hong Kong. But I think all those, right, basically are very, very how to say bottom line driven works, and it's not necessarily very graphic. It's more what sells, and it's a different world altogether.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually was feeling very constrained all these years by the demands of the projects and deadlines and politics and real politics, because I was a part of the government. So this real politics, it's not just politics of the office, it's real politics. So how your master plans can impact real lives of people and the cities. So it's I think when I develop my own style, a lot of that will definitely reflect onto my work, because there's no way I can hide from myself, and how I look at things. So I think sooner or later, whether it's spaces or it is lives you depict, or urban spaces you capture, or emotions you capture, I think all of that will definitely start showing up, because I'm taking a 1 or 2 year break right now to just explore whether I'm capable of doing something, because all of us believe someday that when we retire we're going to paint. So I thought, let me try doing it midway, because if I'm too old anyways, I cannot paint and you cannot see much. And even now I'm not able to see close. I'm not able to see actually my painting properly. So it's really funny. I cannot read. I cannot read what is written. And because of COVID, I could not even get glasses made. And my son had the exam, so I could not step out, because we were very worried that if somebody gets COVID in the home, his exams are gone, right? And it will be very interesting. Yeah, I'll really look forward to the class, and I'm planning to try something interesting from your last class, Pollock's work, right? So you showed me the drip thing, right? One of the issues I found with it is the scale of it, because I think probably for me, I don't have the space, or maybe I just feel very restless looking at very large works, And so I actually bought a few things. So this one is something I tried today. Okay, it was good fun. So this is actually from a baking shop. So this is for scratching. So I really liked the different size of teeth, you see.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I today I tried. I think you can see in the picture. It's quite nice. Actually, it gives a very what I was finding frustrating in the brush, right, is that the brush, right, actually gives a very so like some brushes are some bristles are close, some are far, so it gives a very uneven sort of when you're trying to get calm in the artwork, right, all those strokes which go a bit off, right, are very irritating. Even though my hand is moving uniformly, I find that that bristle going here, right, are very irritating. So I
I
tried this
feel
one.
like that's where, see, that's why abstraction, though it feels like it's a very easy, it looks as if it's a very easy sort of technique, or if it's a very easy realm to be in, but it's also, you have to break how you think things are, right? You have to break away from the whole structured bit of it for getting into it. And breaking a structured understanding of something is so hard, because you're bent upon doing a certain thing. Like if you're drawing a line, it has to go straight. If it goes little teda, you'll get but that's the beauty of it. Letting
It's a
go.
problem. It's I hear you, and I think some of the works you showed were very interesting. I'll try all the techniques you said, and I also bought. I wanted to share with you. Just give me a second. Yeah, it's right here somewhere. Okay, I can just tell you what it is. I'll send you the photograph later.
Okay.
So it's basically like when they make cakes, right? So I was thinking the problem with enamel, right, is